On a bitterly cold winter morning, a lone motorcycle rumbled through the quiet streets of Snowbrook. The town, nestled between frozen hills and frost-covered trees, had settled into its usual winter stillness. The rider, wrapped in a simple blue jacket and wearing an old helmet, carried a large bag of deliveries strapped to his back. To anyone watching, he was just another delivery man, braving the freezing air to drop off packages. But if they had looked into his eyes, they would have seen something unusual, a deep peace, an undeniable warmth, and a quiet power. No one in Snowbrook knew that the delivery man riding through their town that morning was Jesus himself. He had come not in heavenly glory, but in disguise, to see the hearts of those who would greet him. The first stop was a grand mansion on the wealthiest street in Snowbrook. The house stood tall, its stone facade polished and pristine, untouched by the harsh winter. The driveway had been freshly shoveled, leading to a massive oak door with a gleaming brass handle. Jesus pulled up, dusting snow off his gloves before reaching into his bag for a neatly wrapped package. He rang the doorbell. After a moment, the door swung open, revealing Mr. Barrett, a middle-aged man in a tailored navy suit. A gold watch gleamed on his wrist, and in his hand was a steaming cup of coffee. His sharp eyes flicked over Jesus, not with curiosity, but indifference. "Your package, sir," Jesus said, his voice steady, his tone kind. He extended the parcel, then added, "It's quite cold today. Would you mind giving me a glass of water?" Mr. Barrett raised a brow, shifting his coffee mug in his hand. "A glass of water?" he repeated, as though the request was absurd. He let out a short breath, impatient. "I don't have time for that. Just leave it by the door." Then, without another word, he stepped back and slammed the door shut. The echo lingered in the cold morning air. Jesus stood there for a brief moment. No anger, no disappointment. Only a quiet understanding. Then he carefully placed the package on the doorstep, turned back to his motorcycle, and rode away, leaving Mr. Barrett to his warmth, his coffee, and his locked door. At the next house, Jesus knocked again. The door swung open, revealing Ms. Carter, a plump woman dressed in expensive workout clothes, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. Her cheeks were flushed, not from the cold, but from the treadmill she had just stepped off. Sweat glistened on her forehead, yet the diamond studs in her ears sparkled under the porch light. In one hand, she clutched a sleek smartphone, her perfectly manicured nails scrolling rapidly. In the other, she held a half-empty energy drink, condensation dripping down its plastic surface. Without looking up, she mumbled, "Yeah?" "Delivery for you," Jesus said, offering the package with a warm smile. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "It's quite cold today. Would you mind giving me a glass of water?" Ms. Carter let out an exaggerated sigh, her eyes never leaving her phone. "Water? Seriously, I don't have time for that." She waved a dismissive hand. "Just leave it by the door." For a moment, Jesus simply looked at her, not with judgment, but with quiet patience. Then he gently placed the package on the doormat and nodded. Ms. Carter was already walking away, her phone pressed to her ear, lost in a conversation that felt far more important than the shivering man on her doorstep. Jesus turned back to his motorcycle, started the engine, and rode away. Jesus' next stop was at a humble little home. The house was modest, but the warm glow from the windows made it feel inviting. As he knocked, the door quickly swung open. Noah, a young boy around 8 years old, beamed up at him. "Hi, mister. It's freezing outside. Do you want to come in for some hot tea?" Jesus' eyes twinkled. "Thank you, little one. But just a glass of water will do." Noah dashed inside. Moments later, he returned, carefully holding a glass of water with both hands. "Here, I hope it helps." Jesus accepted the drink, took a sip, and gently placed his hand on the boy's head. I bless you, my child." A sudden warmth spread through Noah's body. He didn't know why, but he felt lighter, happier, completely at peace. Jesus smiled one last time before stepping back onto his motorcycle and driving away into the winter morning. Jesus' final stop was on the outskirts of Snowbrook. A small, worn-down house stood there, its wooden walls weathered and barely holding together against the bitter wind. Snow piled against its crumbling steps, and the dim light from a single window flickered weakly. Jesus knocked, but no one answered. He waited for a moment, then gently set the package down and turned to leave. Just then, the door creaked open. Mrs. Reed, an elderly woman wrapped in a thin, tattered shawl, stepped out, her frail hands trembling from the cold. Her face was lined with age, her cheeks hollow, yet her eyes still carried kindness despite the hardships she had endured. She gasped at the sight of the package on her doorstep. Looking up, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, thank you. I never thought someone would send me anything." Jesus smiled gently. "Could I trouble you for a glass of water?" Mrs. Reed's eyes widened. "Of course. Wait here." She hurried inside, moving as fast as her weak legs would allow. Moments later, she returned, cradling a small, cracked cup filled to the brim with water. "I'm sorry," she said, a little embarrassed. "This is all I have." Jesus took the cup, drank a sip, and looked at her kindly. "Thank you. This is a gift just for you." Curious Mrs. Reed unwrapped the package, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a thick, warm coat, fresh food, and a small card that read, "I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." Matthew 25:35. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked up, ready to speak, ready to thank him, but the delivery man had vanished. The next morning, the entire town gathered at church for Sunday service. The air was crisp, and the warm glow from the chandeliers made the space feel inviting. Mr. Barrett sat near the front, adjusting his cufflinks, a nagging feeling stirring inside him. Miss Carter tapped her fingers on the pew, her phone tucked away but her mind restless. Noah sat beside his mother, his legs swinging, remembering the kind man he had met the day before. Mrs. Reed, wrapped in her new coat, folded her hands, feeling an unusual peace. As the congregation bowed their heads in prayer, the large screen at the front of the church suddenly flickered on. No one had touched it. Murmurs spread as glowing letters appeared. "Yesterday I came to you disguised as a delivery man. Some of you shut your doors in my face. Some ignored my presence. But a few with humble hearts welcomed me with kindness. They will receive their reward in heaven." The church fell silent. Mr. Barrett felt his stomach tighten, his mind flashing back to the slammed door. Ms. Carter froze, the memory of her dismissive words echoing in her ears. Noah's eyes widened. "It was him?" he whispered in awe. Mrs. Reed clutched her coat, her heart pounding, not in fear but in overwhelming gratitude. The message was clear. Jesus had been among them, and their choices had been seen. Jesus once said in Matthew 25:40, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." This story is a reminder that Jesus can come to us in any form, a weary traveler, a stranger in need, or even a delivery man on an old motorcycle. The real test is not whether we recognize him, but how we respond when kindness is asked of us. So, when the knock comes at your door, will you turn him away, or will you welcome him with an open heart? Always be ready to show love, because one day it may be Jesus standing on your doorstep.